Hi, everyone. Thanks a lot for tuning into our podcast today. This is Anupama Kapadia, Editor-in-Chief at Enago Academy, and your host for the day. Today's topic is AI readiness in academia, exploring learning-centered solutions beyond detection. And I am joined by Rachel Riffe, a health sciences librarian at Eastern Kentucky University, who has been at the forefront of addressing one of the academia's most pressing challenges: how to maintain academic integrity and meaningful learning in the age of AI. Rachel brings a unique perspective as both a medical librarian and an educator who is a front runner in AI literacy. So, hi, Rachel. Welcome to our podcast. So nice to have you here.
Hi, Dr. Kapadia. It is wonderful to be here with y'all today. And I can't wait to get into such an important topic as AI integration in higher education.
Absolutely. And so let's begin. I think let's dive down so that our audience can hear you talk more about this. So yeah, Rachel, you have been working, at the intersection of academic innovation and AI for a while now. So before we dive into our conversation, what does AI ready actually mean to you when we talk about higher education? Could you tell our audience a little bit more about this?
Of course, I will say that, first of all, the views I express here are my own and don't necessarily reflect upon my university. But bearing that in mind, I believe that AI readiness goes beyond simply hitting benchmarks for career readiness for students, and it certainly goes beyond how to use specific tools. I think this is something that folks get conflated. As we know, the AI um, informational sphere is constantly evolving, and the tools that seem to be most beneficial today, 6 months from now might be practically irrelevant. And as such, I think it is a disservice to our students to
Mhm.
only teach them effectively how to plug in prompts and get responses. I think this goes into how they interact with knowledge and information as a whole. And
Mhm.
in that regard, our responsibilities as librarians, like myself, and educators, really hasn't changed that much in the past 10 years, 20 years. For decades, we have a mission, and it is up to us to fulfill that. And regardless of what tools are available to us, we put our students first and their personal growth first.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. And because we're talking about tools, and you did mention students, but also the educators, right up until about a few months ago, there was heavy reliance on AI content detectors. Many institutions and departments used to rely on them. But now we have reports that show high false positive rates and also bias. So, what are the key limitations of these tools in your experience?
In my experience, I believe they degrade trust
Hmm.
between students and professors. It puts the students in an uncomfortable position because it makes them feel as though they are guilty until proven innocent in regards to their work.
Yes.
I think there's a misconception that all students are 100% on board with using AI to effectively do their schoolwork for them. And
Mhm.
I can say from experience with my health science students and other students I've worked with in the library, this is actually not the case. It comes down to students want to explore their own ideas
Mhm.
and offer an authentic look into themselves as well as into the work that they want to do. And they
Mhm.
don't necessarily find AI to be um, an integral part to that. For them to submit something and a professor to come back and say, this seems to be mostly AI generated is incredibly offensive to them.
Mhm.
Um, and as a result, it puts the professor in an awkward position because they don't want to reward bad behavior, but they also don't want to alienate students who are working hard. And as somebody who works with primarily first generation students, as well
Mhm.
as students from rural areas, these are these are students whose vernacular does not match standard, English vernacular, and as a result, um, they are more likely to flag as AI generated content just because the sentence structure isn't maybe as cohesive to the norm as other students. And in a lot of cases, these students are already feeling as though they might not belong in a university setting. And so it is
Mm.
just that much more damaging when something like false plagiarism allegations comes up against them. So
Yeah.
we need to be moving past that if at all possible.
Yes. So I completely agree. I think, based on what we have understood also by talking to experts such as you, the psychological impact on students, who have to live under constant suspicion, by faculty, by professors, that actually, it does not help. It does not help the learning outcomes. It does not help their will, to study, to learn, to contribute back to the community. I think that's very close to the hearts of the first generation learners. They always want to contribute back to the community, but I think living under constant suspicion doesn't help for sure. And such detection failures that we see now in different reports, they definitely undermine their trust in the academic processes. You know, first of all, they're new to them. Second, once they're introduced to these academic processes, and if they get such experiences, that's probably undermines their complete trust. It erodes their trust in the process, in the system, and they may not want to, come back. So, completely agree. Do you have any, basically, do you have any examples, or do you have any quotes that maybe students have shared with you about their relationship with AI tools? So far, are they comfortable with it? Um, are they constantly living under fear? I know you discussed about, them not being wanting to, being called out for suspicion, or, things like that. But have they ever discussed it with you, one on one, on what challenges are they facing? Has it come out that they've not been taught how to use AI responsibly? What are your thoughts on this?
It's difficult for the students to discuss because
Okay.
they're waiting on direction from their professors, and their professors are awaiting direction from their universities.
Mm-hmm.
And as everybody knows in higher ed, there's a dissonance in messaging, even from department to department and class to class. And plenty of studies have shown that students um, don't react well to when, you know, basic structural stuff isn't standardized. A big push that we have at EKU, for example, is we are switching to a new LMS, and we are trying to standardize the page layouts as much as we can. And that's a very basic thing. And but when you get into, you know, pedagogical practices, I mean, students don't consciously understand that, but they do feel when a lecturer isn't confident in the guidance that they're giving them. And so, I everybody, it seems to be operating in kind of a I don't want to say avoid, but everybody is kind of
Mm-hmm.
scrambling for purchase to a certain degree. I will say
Okay.
EKU, we have a dedicated AI person that works with the university's um, administration, basically, to help kind of build out some of this infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
But in regards to students and their personal opinions, I can think of a couple
Mm-hmm.
points. First of all, there are the ones that think that it is a shortcut. Um, and I think that's actually more of an issue with how we position the value of academic instruction. We treat it in a lot of respects as these are the boxes that the students have to check to get from a broke undergraduate student to an engineer or a chemist or somebody who's in med school. And for those of us who have chosen to be in academia as our profession, we understand that education is meant to be more than that.
Yep.
And so I think of AI is a sort of institutional stress test. I've
Mm,
mentioned that in a couple different spaces.
mm,
And students can very much feel that. I've had one student come to me, and she is in occupational therapy, and they were developing um, program plans basically for I believe it was a geriatric uh, program in which it was like a senior enrichment and fitness sort of thing, and they all had
mm,
to come up with their own program. And
mm,
she remarked on being very frustrated because a student used ChatGPT for the whole thing um, got a
mm,
better grade than her. And I was like, "Well, are you thinking you're going to just do that next time?" And she said, "No, because I care about my future patients, and this is enjoyable for me." And what that tells
mm,
me is that students aren't necessarily wanting to outsource all of their thinking, but they do see value
mm,
in utilizing these tools. Similarly, some of them are actually really skeptical of it. I want to say he was a junior, and I remember being blown away because he said this and I asked him what his major was, and he said that he was in um, sports nutrition, and he wants to go to culinary school after this. Um, I asked him what his research project was on. He's like, "Well, I'm actually really concerned about biases in LL, um, LLM designs," and he went into this saying, the data is often skewed because of demographics and such and such, and I was very surprised because that's not the depth in which undergraduates typically engage with it unless they're in something like a computer science or engineering field. But for
got it.
that to be such a widespread uh, point of discussion as to kind of ripple out into other disciplines, I think says something.
Mm, awesome. Wouldn't it be great if, there would be debates and discussions between groups of students who have different understanding of AI? For example, this person that you spoke with, who wants to do culinary school, I think he understood or he understands the LLM limitations a lot better than possibly other students. So yeah, I think at least the least that AI is currently positively doing is making students think about their role, in the courses that they opt to do or they choose to do. So at least that's happening, and hopefully they will embrace AI in the right way rather than completely relying on it or choosing for AI to do their thinking. So you mentioned the stress test, and I know you have spoken about it quite a bit. But can you, for the sake of the audience, can you elaborate a little bit on what you mean by that? And with respect to the stress test, what are you currently seeing in your daily interactions with students and with faculty in your role as a librarian?
So, in regards to the stress test, I speak of that um, as a general observation. I think that goes beyond just my institution.
Mm-hmm,
Um, Clearly, when we go to a conference and it seems like 70% of the breakout rooms and panels have to do with AI. Clearly,
yeah.
that is in the forefront of everybody's minds. And I believe some of that might come down to everybody feels like they need to be on the cutting edge lest they be rendered irrelevant.
Mm-hmm,
And I personally don't buy into that, just because, as I said at the beginning of this, our mission as educators hasn't changed. When I teach information literacy to my students, I bring in AI, but I also give them use cases that for where they could use this. I tell them where they absolutely should not be using it. I do not want to see my nursing students using ChatGPT to develop care plans, for example.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
But in regards to positive use cases, like our computer science students, they really do need to be plugging in some tools to understand how to automate things, create, uh, um, use it to edit code, assess code, definitely not generate an entire app using AI generated code, because we know that there's errors in that. Um, but it's our responsibility as faculty to guide them and to have understanding how to use that well, and
Mhm.
for us to be able to do that, we need to understand our own relationship with AI. And I think that's
Yeah.
where people are struggling. And I wonder if um, we as faculty might not necessarily be digging in deep enough to understand our relationship with it.
Yeah.
It seems like we go into, this is a specific tool that does this, and this might help you with this specific task or to streamline this. Um, but I view it as I want to understand the repercussions that has on myself and my work. Um, and I talk about authenticity a lot when I teach, as well as when I am interacting with my peers. And I want to ensure that if I use AI, I want it to enhance um, the image of myself as a scholar, and enhance my presence in the work that I do. And that's what I would want for my students. But self-reflection is difficult. Doing at an institutional level is incredibly
Mhm.
difficult. And I know uh, some of the disciplines that really are early adopters. My background was in communication, and so understanding positionality and the impact of technology on social structures, that comes really natural to me. But if you're a physicist and you haven't gone through 12
Yeah.
communication courses, or any, or psychology, or some of these that really help you develop pedagogical skills, and how they
Mhm.
impact the way we learn and the way we cannibalize information. It's a hard ask, and I think it's something we need to engage with regardless. Does that answer your question at all?
Yeah, yeah, it does, it does. I think it also brought up a couple of points that I hadn't thought of. So I think I'll touch upon that a few minutes down the line, specifically on information literacy. So thanks for that. Um, Coming back to the topic about detection, since we both agree, and I think the industry reports also support this, that there are significant limitations with, the detection tools that are out there. Um, have you thought about any alternative approaches that institutions should be considering, given, the customization that is required, like you mentioned, for each subject or each, say, background, humanities versus medicine versus computer science, right? So are there any alternative approaches that institutions in general should be considering, and not just necessarily EKU, but institutions in general? Could you give us a little bit of more an insight on this?
I think this is a nod that I'm actually going to give to the publishing industry.
Mhm.
Theoretically, we should be preparing our students to move on into professional roles. And for some students, that includes publishing. And, we ourselves are publishing. And I'd point out that effectively, there's a lot of publishers that have clear guidelines on how that they use AI, and how some use cases are beneficial, others can be a block to publication. And I think that clarity is something we should bring into it. There aren't a lot of options outside of the checkers, as faulty as they are. So what I've been advising my faculty to do in the interim um, is really focus on the relationship they're building with their students. This is difficult, of course, if you have like an online only course, especially if it's an online asynchronous course,
Okay.
because those students are not going to be engaged in the same way that an
Mhm.
on-campus traditional student will. Especially since they have a lot. Typically, they're non-trads. They have a lot going on, and they're going to be more um, prone to want to use AI in less responsible ways.
Yeah.
Um, I would love to say that there's a technological answer. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, that's not something that the um, market has offered to anybody yet. And I will
Mm-hmm.
stress that if it was offered, the use cases for different disciplines are so varied, it would
Mm-hmm.
almost need to be set up as rules that individual professors and disciplines could follow.
Mm-hmm.
So
Got it.
that also makes it difficult.
Understood. So I think while you mentioned that technological solution is not out there, I think what we can agree on is from an approach point of view, it needs to be focused on process. It needs to be focused on the learning outcomes. Possibly transparency over surveillance is should be the norm. The solution should be learning centered, such that the student derives a lot out of the process. And yeah, I mean, basically, when we were looking at solutions, at our end, we definitely boiled down to a couple where, our solution had automated authorship verification, smart content classification, effort and engagement analysis, shareable reports for faculty from the point of view of, using our solutions, and the reports could be shared directly with faculty or even with the students if the faculty chooses to do so, and basically seamless integration and comprehensive support for the entire department, such that administratively it's not a headache to integrate these solutions. So I'm talking about documark. This is a product that we currently have, and that many universities are currently using also. So yeah, I mean, specifically this product, it deals with the the issues that we have encountered with respect to writing outcomes, for example, sample assignments, thesis, research papers. I think a lot of the feedback that we've received from different stakeholders is that it is impossible to, comprehend what is the student's role when they are asked to write an essay or submit an essay to an evaluator. So that's where we came up with this solution. um, do you think uh, tools like these or solutions like these that form that are produced over the premise of what I mentioned in terms of transparency, learning centered solutions, faculty being able to choose what to do, it's completely under their control, and it is less of a negative mindset where you assume that the students are automatically using AI or plagiarizing, which might not be the case. So, do you think these tools like these are necessary in today's environment? And if yes, how will they change or reshape your current academic workflow that your university or any other university is currently administering? So, what are your thoughts on this?
I think this is a very good direction to go, simply
Mhm.
because not only does it, I keep going back to trust between
Yeah,
students and professors,
absolutely.
and
Mhm.
this is something that would benefit both sides in this, because not only would the professor have a record of how their students are using AI, um, students would also be able to kind of have open communication with the professors as they generate their work. They'll be able to see edits. They'll be able to pull up their own records and say, this is what I did.
Mhm.
This is what my records show. This is what yours show. And I think that actually enables some dialogue
Mhm.
that maybe students currently, even prior to AI, didn't necessarily have with professors.
Yeah.
And I think that specifically is great. I also think this is a good way for students to use their ideas within the AI sphere without
Mhm.
necessarily giving their intellectual property, which I truly believe the work that undergrads, even if it's a freshman 102 English class, the work that they create is theirs, and that one of the qualms I've had with certain AI tools is, when a student uploads it, they lose control over that content, and it's absorbed
Mm.
into, the training data. And so I think this
Mhm.
is also a really great way to give them some safety rails for how to use AI responsibly while also maintaining some ownership over their work and ideas.
Yes, all right. I think again on the same page there. So maybe coming back to the point that we now, we discussed a few minutes back in terms of information literacy, right? So when I say information literacy, I may also mean AI literacy, because, well, I mean, from a student point of view, like you mentioned, they have to be taught on how to use AI and they have to be given that information. So AI literacy particularly is becoming, a major pillar for academic integrity, because students and faculty both need to know about how to use AI for the outcomes to be manageable. So there was this interesting study by MIT. I don't know if you have had a look, where it showed students became more metacognitively aware when they were asked to reflect on their use of AI during writing. So, and also just to add, another expert that we were talking to, she mentioned that the gaps currently pointed out by AI existed well before AI was in the picture. It's just being highlighted now because everyone's hyper aware. So, what does that tell us about how institutions should be teaching students to engage with AI tools, and what does good AI literacy actually look like in a college setting? Could you spell this out for our audience? I think they'd be really interested.
A topic that everybody has a different point of view on that, because in my opinion, as a librarian, AI literacy is information literacy, and it is a tool that we're asking students to integrate.
Yeah.
And to your colleague's point in regards to, this is uncovering gaps that have existed long before I completely agree. AI is just exacerbating it. And that's kind of what I mentioned, why I alluded to AI as as a stress test for academia, because as librarians, we push our students to, laterally read, don't just go from top to bottom of a source
Yeah.
to understand, you know, if that source is authoritative. Move laterally and look at that source from multiple angles and from multiple other sources. Um,
Mhm.
from my perspective as a librarian, where AI makes this even more difficult, and when I say AI, I mean specifically generative AI, such as chatbots, which is
Got it.
in a lot of cases what people mean when they use AI as a blanket term.
Yes.
But that's another issue I have with how we're handling it. Um,
Mhm.
words matter, terms matter, and as a communication person, I know that. Um, if you aren't in my discipline, I acknowledge that perhaps this isn't as clear to you. Um, but in regards um, to chatbots, students, it can feel like kind of a magic box for them. You plug
Yeah.
in questions, it gives you answers, and theoretically, these should be very authoritative answers because it's pulling from the entire internet. Um, surely once we take an average like that, what we're given is the answer, right? um,
Mhm.
we encourage our students to look beyond that, but that's time consuming, and that's been one of my concerns with how quickly we're pushing for adoption on these kinds of things, because
Mhm.
we need to grapple with how, even if we're given citations theoretically at the
Mhm.
end of after we ask a question, we need to understand that those it's still not enough because we
Yeah.
don't understand the context that information is being pulled from, and context is incredibly important.
Understood.
Um,
Yes.
and so we do need to be teaching AI literacy, but
Mhm.
we need to identify what AI literacy actually means,
Yes.
and break it down into areas that we as professionals are equipped to help students grapple with that. I cannot help a student who needs to use an AI tool for data analytics. I can
Mm.
help a student use an AI tool to help them research and write a paper on, let's say, a nursing history.
Mhm.
And those two things seem perhaps unrelated,
Mhm.
but in a world where we are using terms interchangeably, it confuses me, it confuses other faculty, and it definitely confuses students. So we need to be very clear with them how we're framing literacy.
Agreed. I think as a librarian, you're quite uniquely positioned to see how information literacy needs to evolve in the generative AI era.
Mhm.
So I think librarians are currently playing an extremely important role in this transformation. Um, I just wanted to quickly ask if you have implemented an AI literacy program already in whatever form. It may not be complete or it may have just started. But are you able to measure the effectiveness of such literacy programs, particularly, say, for example, in helping users distinguish between reliable and unreliable AI generated content? Is that something that you have thought about or is in the play?
It's definitely something we've talked about. Um, the other librarians and I, under the guidance of our uh, AI, our AI professional on campus, as well as the one of the other librarians actually was selected to be basically her a fellow under her. So
Okay.
they've been working closely together. And as a result, we've been trying to develop lesson plans,
Okay.
utilizing specific use cases for AI tools. Somebody who I think is doing something very interesting at EKU,
Mhm.
that is perhaps a little outside of what most people are doing with generative AI, is our music librarian. Um, he is basically using challenging music majors to use it to find specific scores and
Oh.
develop songs and sheet music based on he does a much better job describing it than me because that is so far outside of my wheelhouse.
Yes, but it sounds
Um,
so interesting. I mean, I would have
it
never,
is.
yeah, I would have never thought music is an area.
Mhm.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, definitely, I would love to speak with him as well. But yeah,
Yeah, he's
thanks for bringing this up. Yeah.
yeah, he's and that's where I think AI is
Mhm.
beneficial is when you get
Mhm.
really really specific with it.
Yes.
Because a senior music theory major
Mhm.
is going to be better equipped to use AI for
Yeah.
music than just saying, here, freshman in English 102, we're going to talk about AI in research because
Mhm.
that is incredibly broad. And um, students who are uninitiated in academia
Mhm.
and research practice can get lost when you're just trying to address something broadly. So I really appreciate what some of my colleagues are doing and being very mindful and specific in how
Mhm.
they're asking students to incorporate AI tools into their practice.
Absolutely. And I think it allows the institution to move forward in terms of supporting uh, AI readiness. And I think if they see each and every department build a use case for AI use, for example, health science or computer science or even music for that matter, it becomes even more imperative for the institution to lay down some guidelines, department wise, subject wise, that this is allowed, or this is not allowed, and this is how we help you to, uh, improve at your course. So that's a very good perspective. Um, so quickly from an institution point of view, because we are at that point, um, what does institutional AI readiness look like in practice right now? So we've spoken about students, we've spoken about faculty, we've spoken about um, each area needing its own AI use case or generative AI use case. For example, music or health science or even computer science. So we haven't spoken about the entire institution, in terms of what is it that institutions need to be AI ready in practice right now, according to you?
I honestly believe that it is unique to each institution.
Yes.
I think, and again, where I believe the stress test comes in is an institution really needs to be cognizant of its mission, its positionality. It needs to understand, its funding constraints and how this can impact implementation. And because it's one, you can't, it can't just go beyond. We have a subscription now to
Yeah.
insert AI tool here. Whatever we do with AI and however we pitch it to our faculty and students, I think it needs to align with an institution's mission, as I said.
Yeah.
I think having an AI expert, like we do, to help guide the administration, is
Mhm.
incredibly important because we don't the normal layperson does not understand how these things work.
Mhm.
There's a lot of people, I think, who think they really have a great handle on how need to understand that just because somebody is positioning themselves as an AI expert does not mean they have the technical knowledge to um, actually function as an AI expert.
Mhm.
And I also would be leery of anybody who just calls themselves an AI expert, simply because we are insisting on using AI as a blanket term to
Mhm.
encompass
Yeah.
many, many different tools. And I truly don't think that understanding how to prompt ChatGPT in different ways constitutes you being a technological expert. Um,
Correct.
for instance, the person who is like our AI advisor at EKU. That's an actual position. She has a PhD in, I believe, electrical engineering, and so
Mhm.
she's been very interested in the science of it. But more importantly than that, she has a robust network of other subject experts that she
Mhm.
has the humility and wisdom to plug into when she doesn't know an answer. And that is something that
Mhm.
all academics need to foster, is the ability and willingness to take that approach when it comes to something as complex as
Mhm.
helping an institution navigate the um, the AI sphere. And similarly, an AI ready institution has a similar understanding that the president is not the one and only expert. Your 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 deans are not comprehensive experts on how
Mhm.
AI functions. And I would think AI readiness is maybe a little bit of a misnomer because you can never be fully ready for something that is constantly changing. Um,
Absolutely.
so I think it really comes down to being curious and agile and trusting in your academic networks as well.
Absolutely. I think in addition to this, what you mentioned earlier, if I could just summarize a couple of points from there, some clear institutional policies and guidelines at least would serve as a good guardrail for the faculty as well as the AI advisor. I think leadership commitment, right, to AI integration as a positive reinforcement so that the students and the faculty both understand that this is for the better. Collaboration, I think you've already covered with not only needing to collaborate internally, but also externally with other experts. Because we're inching towards the end of the podcast, um, a quick question. If you had a blank slate, what are the three priorities would you focus on to make an institution truly AI ready by 2030?
My first point would be institutions need to have a framework for
Mhm,
how they are gauging tools as they surface, as well as understanding how they could be um, impactful for their students and their faculty.
mhm,
And when I say framework, I mean something actionable like a rubric that details the strengths of the tool, the weaknesses of the tool, how it works, and how it could impact um, each one of your colleges or departments. And that's probably something that would fall to the deans as well, and have you uh, are going to produce that. That way, you have a structured way to assess the benefits and potential risks of incorporating tools, because the last thing any university needs to do right now in the current climate is invest in something expensive that doesn't give you a good return on investment. And especially if it's something that could significantly impact your faculty workflows and the way your students are approaching their work.
mhm.
Um, the second thing that I would suggest um, for an institution wanting to be AI ready is have a strong understanding of the of your departments and your faculty and their stressors and um, what tools they actually are wanting. Um,
Yeah.
I think in any large organization, in academia or um, business or government, it's easy to get distracted by a tool that you think will fix workflows, will um, you know you think it's going to have instant buy-in by the students and their teachers. In reality, maybe this isn't actually something that um, your community doesn't find as pressing. Um,
Mhm,
so I would say, you know, rely on the expertise again of your network and the actual needs of your students and faculty, and that would just involve a lot of uh, research, honestly, and open communication with faculty. And in an ideal world, your faculty would also have open communication with the students as well, to be plugged in
yes.
as to their needs and frustrations. I
Mhm,
suppose in the business world, we would call these hurt points rather than something more abstract like just assumed need. My third my third point for an AI ready institution would be to have an understanding of um, where AI needs to be implemented, both in the teaching sphere as well as the research sphere, because again, I've mentioned this several times before. We use AI as a blanket term, but in reality, there are lots of different types of AI, and
yes.
these impact students differently. The teaching side is maybe where we're going to see more generative AI. Of course, I say that and I want to believe that, but as somebody who publishes and is involved with the scholarship side of things, the scholarly community is dealing with um, research papers that have large segments just copy and pasted from an AI tool into the paper and then it's submitted.
Mhm,
So there needs to be a differentiation between how we're using AI um, as scholars and as teachers,
mhm,
and there needs to be guidance on both sides. And I think as these things become more specialized, there's also going to be budget considerations in terms of like who is funding what tool. If it's going to
Mhm.
come out of a research line versus if it's going to come out of a teaching or pedagogical line. And having that conversation now and how we're going to address its uh, address research needs versus educational needs for these is going to be
Mhm.
very important moving forward.
Absolutely. I think that those 3 points quite about somewhat a lot of the educators and librarians also want to say. So thanks for that. Lastly, and of course, this is my final question. What advice would you give to educators who are actually hesitant or overwhelmed by this shift to AI? Because so far we've been discussing about using AI, assuming that educators are for it or librarians are for it and students are also for it, right? Only maybe the use or the policies or the guidelines are not clear. But then we haven't spoken really about the segment that uh, the segment of educators who are not for it. So, is there any advice that you would like to give to this segment?
Well, this is actually great because I am absolutely one of those hesitant adopters.
Mhm.
I fall way more on the skeptical side of implementing these tools,
Mhm.
um, just because this is not the first time that we've done this, especially as from a librarian's point of view, where I go to dinner parties now and they're like, "Do you think you're still going to have a job in 5 years? Because AI could totally do what you're doing." Um, as librarians, uniquely, we have heard this so many times.
Mhm.
There are examples in like medieval texts about how people were upset that scrolls were being replaced with books, and then more
Okay.
recently, what are we going to do when the internet replaces books? And now we're going. It's almost like people are concerned with, what are we going to do when AI replaces the internet? And to a
Mhm.
certain degree, um, I actually share some of those fears, not because I think it's truly going to replace, but
Mhm.
the degradation of search quality is already something we're seeing.
Mhm.
And for those of us who are hesitant in regards to not necessarily how it could impact your students cognitively, but for those of us who are concerned about um, access to quality information that isn't just a solid page worth of AI generated results on Google.
Mhm.
Um, Understand the tools really, really well. Um, Understand where they slot into um, y- your ideology as a scholar and as an educator.
Mhm.
Personally, um, I do not use AI to draft anything. Every single email, every single social media post, um, that is entirely me because
Mhm.
I am a communicator and nobody is going to sound as great um, as I do when I'm trying to be myself. And some people will say, you can train an AI tool to sound exactly like you. Um, for me, I don't see how that really saves me that much time.
Mhm.
And like I mentioned about my students, they want to be authentically them. The student in occupational therapy, she wanted to do everything hands on because she wanted it to come from her. And I don't think we're ever really going to lose that. And
Got it.
I think if you are hesitant about AI, understand it, teach it well
Mhm.
to your students and faculty who are very interested in it. Encourage them to be critical because technology moves forward responsibly when its users are critical of it. Um,
Yes.
we do not need to buy into like LinkedIn hype about, change your prompt style to change your entire workflow in life. You know, we talk about how it automates things, but so do Excel macros. So We just need to be skeptical of everything that others are trying to sell us. And just, I keep talking about mission and I keep talking about responsibilities as educators, and we need to hold on to that. And when we invest in tools, we need to make sure that they are helping us be more responsible curators of information and more responsible consumers of information.
Absolutely. So thank you so much, Rachel. I think we're at the end of our podcast. So thanks again for sharing your invaluable insights on one of the most pressing issues facing academia today. It's really clear that AI is not just a technological shift, but also a call for all of us to rethink on how we redefine academic integrity, learning outcomes, student support, faculty support, even in this area. So, to our listeners, I hope today's conversation has sparked new ideas about moving beyond policing AI use towards empowering students with AI literacy, critical thinking, and ethical practices. As Rachel highlighted, readiness is about fostering a culture that integrates AI responsibly while upholding fairness and academic trust. So, if you are interested in learning more about how solutions like Documark can operationalize these values by emphasizing learning processes, do visit us as Trinka for resources, demos, and continued discussions on building an AI ready future. Until then, this is Anupama Kapadia signing off. Stay inspired and stay curious. Goodbye.